Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to crack open some ancient wisdom. We're drawing from a stack of your sources, specifically some really compelling excerpts from a commentary on the Dhammapada. Now, for anyone less familiar, you can think of the Dhammapada as, well, a cornerstone collection of sayings attributed to the Buddha, often using simple verses, stories, really profound insights. So our mission today is to really dig into two short, but I think powerful stories presented in these texts. Each one gives us a different angle on the fundamental nature and origin of suffering, dukkha. We'll look at the situations, the people involved, and what these narratives tell us about why sorrow and fear pop up in our lives, according to these sources anyway.
Yeah, these are wonderful examples, actually. They show how wisdom traditions often use stories, narrative, to get complex teachings across. It shows these principles in action, in situations that feel incredibly human, quite relatable, even now. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how you have these two seemingly quite different experiences, loss, disappointment, but they lead to teachings that are, well, deeply connected.
Absolutely. So let's unpack this material you've shared. Let's see what crucial nuggets are waiting for us here. Okay, the first story. It introduces us to a householder who's just grappling with immense grief. The sources paint a pretty vivid picture. His son, his beloved son, has passed away, and this man is just consumed by sorrow, utterly consumed. He goes to the charnel ground, which is basically an ancient burial or cremation site, and he's just weeping uncontrollably. It's that raw, visceral pain of loss, something so many of us can unfortunately connect with.
Yes, exactly. And the text tells us the Buddha, with his insight, saw the depth of this man's suffering, but also, importantly, recognized his potential for understanding. Seeing this early in the morning, the Buddha actually went to the householder's home.
Right. And the householder, even in his grief, invites the Buddha in. They sit down, and when the Buddha gently asks him, why are you suffering? He explains, of course, it's the overwhelming sorrow over losing his son.
And this is where the teaching really starts. The Buddha offers a broader perspective, reminds him that death isn't just confined to one person or one place. It's the universal condition. All beings subject to existence. Nothing that's conditioned, anything that arises from causes and conditions, nothing like that is permanent. It can't be. So because of this impermanence, the wise approach lost differently. They reflect rightly understanding that. Well, the text says, what is subject to death has died. What is subject to breaking has broken, quote unquote. They cultivate mindfulness of this reality instead of just being swept away by grief.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. The Buddha actually brings up examples from the past. He mentions wise individuals who, when they faced the death of their own beloved sons, didn't fall into despair like this. Instead, they understood impermanence. They actively cultivated mindfulness of death.
Right. And the householder, naturally, he's intrigued. He asks, who are these wise people? When did they live? And to illustrate, the Buddha recounts a past life story. Your sources call it the Uraga Jataka. This story uses a really powerful analogy. A snake shedding its old skin, its worn-out skin. This shedding is compared to the departed leaving the physical body. And the verses from this Jataka, quoted in the commentary, they emphasize that the departed person isn't aware of or affected by the relative's lamentation. There's one line that's quite striking. Therefore, I do not grieve for him. He has gone to whatever is his destiny. Quite stark.
Wow. So bringing it back to the present moment with this grieving householder, the Buddha really highlights the contrast, doesn't he? You have the ancient wise men guided by this understanding, this mindfulness. They kept going with their daily duties. They didn't stop eating, didn't abandon their responsibilities. They accepted the reality. But the householder, lost in his sorrow, had done just that. Abandoned his work, wasn't eating, just weeping.
And this really sets the stage for the core teaching delivered specifically to him. It's encapsulated in this verse. From the beloved is born sorrow, from the beloved is born fear. For one freed from the beloved there is no sorrow, how then fear? The Pali, for those interested, is piato jayate soko, piato jayate baya, piato vipamutasanati soko kutupaya.
That's a powerful statement. From the beloved is born sorrow. Okay, so the sources explain that piatar, meaning from the beloved, signifies that sorrow and fear. They're fundamentally rooted in the cycle of existence itself. The sources use the term vaitamulako for that root in existence, but they arise specifically dependent on a beloved being or even a cherished conditioned thing, something temporary, something subject to change. And when you're freed from that intense attachment to the beloved, well, the sorrow and fear tied to it just cease. They can't arise.
Exactly. And the outcome. According to these sources, after hearing this discourse, reflecting on it, the householder achieved the fruit of stream entry, sota patifala, which is, the first major stage of spiritual awakening in this tradition. It signifies a really profound shift in his understanding.
Okay, fascinating. Really fascinating. So that's story one, sorrow born from the beloved. Now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's transition to the second story in your sources. It feels quite different, at least initially. This one's about a Brahmin, described as having wrong views, interestingly, and his relationship with his farm field.
Yes, the story finds this Brahmin working his field right by a riverside. And the Buddha, again, perceiving potential for understanding in him, went to where he was working.
And what's interesting here is the Brahmin's initial reaction, or maybe lack of reaction. He didn't offer the usual signs of respect, hospitality, nothing, just remained silent. Even when the Buddha spoke to him first, the Buddha simply asks, "What are you doing?" The Brahmin says, "Clearing my field," and the Buddha leaves, just like that.
But he didn't stop there. The sources describe the Buddha returning the next day. The Brahmin's plowing now. Same question, same kind of minimal response, and the Buddha leaves again. And this apparently continued over several days. The Buddha visiting, asking what he was doing as the Brahmin sowed his seeds, and later as he was guarding the field from pests or whatever. It's this quiet, persistent presence.
Right, kind of building this silent rapport, maybe. Until one day, the Brahmin actually speaks to the Buddha, beyond just answering the direct question. He acknowledges the Buddha's consistent visits ever since he started clearing the field, and then he makes a promise, a significant one. He says, "Look, if my crop is successful, I will share it with you." He emphasizes, "I won't eat it myself without sharing." And he declares the Buddha his friend from that day forward. So you can feel his hope, his anticipation building around this harvest, right? And this new friendship. Fast forward, the crop is ready, looks good. The Brahmin makes all the preparations to harvest the very next day. All his efforts, his hopes, that promise to his new friend. It's all tied up in this field now. And then that night, disaster. A heavy rain falls, the river swells, and poof, the entire crop is washed away. The field is left bare, like it had been scraped clean, the text says. Just gone.
And the sources note, interestingly, that the Buddha, with his foresight, his insight, had known from the very first day he visited. He knew this crop would not succeed.
Wow, imagine the Brahmin's devastation. He goes to the field in the morning, sees it empty. The text says powerful sorrow arose in him. And it's not just the physical crop, is it? It's his hope, his hard work, that promise to share with the Buddha, the symbol of his declared friendship, all dashed. He's so distraught he actually stops eating, just lies down on his couch, overwhelmed.
Yeah. Hearing of his state, the Buddha then goes to the Brahmin's house door. The Brahmin, alerted he's arrived, asks his attendants, "Bring my friend in, seat him."
So the Buddha comes in, sits down, and asks, "Where is the Brahmin?" He's told, "Oh, he's lying in his room." The Buddha has him called. The Brahmin comes, sits down, and the Buddha asks quite simply, "What's wrong?"
And the Brahmin just pours it all out, explains his sorrow. The total loss of the crop he'd worked on for so long, and also the deep disappointment of not being able to fulfill his promise. That hope of sharing with the Buddha, gone. He says again, he's lost his appetite completely.
And the Buddha then asks him, "Do you know what caused your sorrow?" The Brahmin says, "Well, no, I don't know, but perhaps you do." And the Buddha confirms, "Yes, Brahmin, indeed. Sorrow or fear, when arising, arises depending on craving."
And this is the core teaching for the Brahmin, presented in a verse that's remarkably similar to the first story. From craving is born sorrow. From craving is born fear. For one freed from craving, there is no sorrow. How then fear? The Pali here is chaya jayate soko, tajaya jayate baya, tayavipumatasana soko kutubaha.
So tanea, from craving. Okay. The sources elaborate on this. They say this craving, tanya, refers to that intense desire, that thirst that arises via the six sense doors. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and even thinking, cognizing with the mind. It's through these doors we develop attachment, desire for things. And sorrow and fear arise dependent on this craving. And just like with the beloved object, for someone freed from that craving, sorrow and fear simply don't exist. There's no basis for them.
Precisely. In the conclusion, it mirrors the first story exactly. The Brahmin, hearing this teaching, understanding its import, its deep truth, he also became established in the fruit of stream entry, that same first stage of awakening.
Okay, right. This is fascinating because we have these two very similar verses, but they point to slightly different, or maybe seemingly different, origins for sorrow and fear. One says it's from the beloved, Pia. The other says it's from craving, Tana. How do these sources help us connect these two ideas? Are they saying different things, or are they really, two sides of the same coin?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And this is where the insights really seem to converge. The commentary for that first verse, the one about the beloved, it links sorrow and fear to the beloved object or person, sure, but it also explicitly states it's vaya malako arising with existence, or the cycle of existence as its root. That hints at a deeper underlying process. Then the second verse comes along and explicitly names craving as the source.
Right. So if I'm putting this together from these sources, the beloved isn't just the object itself, the sun, the harvest, the friend. The beloved is the object of our attachment,
Yeah.
right? It's what we cling to, what we invest our hopes in, what we identify with. And the craving, that's the underlying force, that deep-seated desire, that clinging, that's what makes something beloved in the first place,
Yeah.
in a way that sets us up for suffering if we lose it or if things don't go as planned. Is that
Exactly. Precisely. The sources strongly imply that craving, taha, is the more fundamental root here. It's the driving force. It's the engine that creates the attachment to the beloved object or person. And when that attachment, which is fueled by craving, gets broken through death, loss, disappointment, whatever it is, that's when the sorrow and fear manifest so powerfully. So freedom, in this view, isn't necessarily about never loving or desiring anything. It's more about releasing the clinging, the craving. And when you release that, it dissolves the power of the beloved object or outcome to cause that kind of deep-seated suffering when circumstances inevitably change.
And what's incredibly striking, really, is that both these individuals, they come from seemingly different scenarios of loss, different starting points. One grieving a person, the other grieving a lost opportunity, a lost object, a broken promise. Yet they both reach the same significant stage of understanding, stream entry. They reach it by grasping this connection between their suffering and either the specific beloved object or the underlying craving. It really suggests that understanding this mechanism is a critical step, a key insight on a path to liberation.
Absolutely. They both arrived at an insight into the true cause of their suffering, transcending the surface event, the immediate loss, to see the deeper pattern of attachment and craving that was really at play.
So we've taken quite a deep dive here into these two ancient stories from your sources, and I think we've distilled a really powerful core insight. While sorrow and fear, they feel like direct, unavoidable reactions to losing someone or something we cherish, these texts argue they ultimately stem from a deeper place, from our craving, our attachment to the beloved objects or people or outcomes in our lives.
And understanding this root cause, as shown by the transformative outcomes in these stories, it's presented as a really fundamental step, a step towards navigating the inevitable impermanence, the losses, the disappointments that are just inherent in existence.
Yeah, it's a perspective that really challenges our maybe common sense reactions, which often tell us, well, sorrow is just natural. It's a passive response to loss. You just feel it. These teachings suggest there's an active underlying mechanism, this craving, this attachment that we can actually understand and potentially work with.
Which does raise an important question for us today, doesn't it? If sorrow and fear are born of craving and attachment to the beloved, and these stories show that freedom from that painful cycle is possible, well, what does that imply for how we relate to the people and things we care about deeply in our own lives?
Yeah.
Can we cherish without clinging? Can we love without that kind of attachment that leads to suffering? Something perhaps worth reflecting on.